Welcome. What you are about to watch is not science fiction, and it is not folklore. It is a serious investigation into one of history's most compelling unresolved questions, the mystery of Göbekli Tepe, the monument that broke the history books. Across the world, in universities, research institutes, and field excavations, serious scholars are wrestling with evidence that does not fit the accepted story. Evidence that has been documented, measured, and peer-reviewed, and that still has no satisfying conventional explanation. We are going to look at that evidence carefully, without prejudice in either direction, not dismissing what is extraordinary, but not accepting it without scrutiny either. The truth, as always, is in the details. In 1994, Kurdish shepherd Savak Yildiz was tending his flock on a hilltop in southeastern Turkey when he noticed something unusual: a series of large, shaped limestone slabs protruding from the ground. He reported the discovery to the local museum. German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt came to investigate and realized immediately what he was looking at. He would spend the rest of his life excavating what turned out to be the most important archaeological discovery of the 20th century. Göbekli Tepe is a complex of large stone circles built at least 12,000 years ago, 6,000 years before Stonehenge, 4,000 years before the wheel, and at least 5,000 years before any civilization was supposed to have existed. Its T-shaped limestone pillars, some weighing up to 20 tons, are decorated with elaborate carvings of animals, abstract symbols, and human figures. It required an organized workforce, specialized craft skills, and sustained institutional memory to build. And it was constructed by people who, according to everything we thought we knew about that era, should have been simple nomadic hunter-gatherers. This is where our investigation begins. Stay with us, because the further we go into the evidence, the more extraordinary it becomes. The story you think you know is only the surface. Beneath it lies something far more remarkable. Let us begin. Before we examine the specific evidence, we need to step back and understand the context. This case does not exist in isolation. It sits within the broader phenomenon of lost civilizations, and to properly evaluate what we are looking at, we need to understand the broader picture that surrounds it. For as long as human beings have told stories, they have told stories about what was lost. Every great culture on Earth carries myths of a golden age, a time before the current order, when civilization stood taller, knew more, and reached further than anything that came after. For centuries, scholars categorized these stories as allegory, comforting fictions invented by cultures to explain the gap between their aspirations and their achievements. But a quiet revolution in archaeology, geology, and oceanography has changed that calculus. The evidence now accumulating from seafloors, ice cores, and ancient texts is demanding a fundamental revision of the human story, one in which the line between myth and memory is far thinner than we imagined. The conventional timeline of civilization holds that complex urban society first emerged in Mesopotamia around 3,500 BC. Before that, scattered farming villages, nomadic hunter-gatherers, and nothing more. But this tidy narrative has been challenged repeatedly by anomalous discoveries that do not fit the accepted sequence. Megalithic structures dated to 10,000 BC or earlier. Astronomical alignments encoded in monuments by cultures supposedly too primitive to understand the sky. Mathematical ratios embedded in architecture that would not be formally derived for thousands of years. These discoveries are not fringe fabrications. They are measured, published, and debated in peer-reviewed literature. They point toward a past far more complex than the textbooks describe. What happens when a civilization falls? Most of its knowledge disappears. The libraries burn, the engineers die, the farmers abandon the fields. Within a generation or two, the grandchildren of architects are living in the ruins of buildings they cannot build. We know this happened in the Bronze Age collapse of 1200 BC, when a networked civilization spanning the Mediterranean was destroyed in a matter of decades. We know it from the fall of Rome. History is not a steady march of progress. It is punctuated by catastrophic resets, after which humanity must begin again. The question is whether some of those resets happened far earlier than we know, and whether their traces are still waiting to be found beneath our feet. This context matters because it tells us something important. What we are about to investigate is not an isolated curiosity. It is part of a pattern that researchers in multiple fields have been independently documenting for decades, and patterns in science demand explanation. With that foundation in place, let us now turn to the specific case at hand. Now we reach the heart of the matter. The core evidence surrounding Göbekli Tepe, the monument that broke the history books, is more extensive, more verified, and more troubling for conventional explanations than most people realize. Let us walk through it systematically, fact by fact, and allow the evidence to speak for itself. We are not going to speculate here. Every point that follows is documented in peer-reviewed publications, official archaeological records, or government archives that are publicly accessible. The question is not whether these facts are real. The question is what they mean. Consider this first extraordinary detail. Radiocarbon dating of organic material found in the fill between the stone pillars at Göbekli Tepe has consistently returned dates of 10,000 to 9,500 BC, making it the oldest known complex monumental architecture on Earth, predating the emergence of agriculture, pottery, writing, and every other marker of civilization in the conventional timeline. This single data point, if taken in isolation, might be set aside. Anomalies happen, instruments malfunction, researchers make mistakes, but as we continue, you will see that this is not an isolated anomaly. It is part of a consistent and documented pattern. But that is only the beginning. Researchers also discovered the site contains at least 20 circular enclosures, each with a ring of T-shaped limestone pillars up to 5 meters tall, surrounding two central pillars up to 6 meters tall. Only approximately 5% of the site has been excavated. Ground-penetrating radar surveys suggest the buried portion extends across an area of roughly 90,000 square meters. Now, a skeptic might propose an alternative explanation for this, and that is entirely reasonable. We should always test alternative explanations before accepting extraordinary ones. The problem is that the alternative explanations, when examined carefully, create more problems than they solve. The mystery deepens when we examine. The pillars at Göbekli Tepe are decorated with bas-relief carvings of extraordinary quality, depicting foxes, lions, bulls, snakes, spiders, vultures, and scorpions with an artistic skill and anatomical accuracy that would not have been predicted from any model of 10,000 BC human capability. The central pillars in each enclosure appear to be stylized human figures with arms, belts, and loincloths visible in the stone. This is where the conventional account begins to strain. Each individual fact might be dismissed or minimized in isolation. But the cumulative weight of the evidence is another matter entirely. Perhaps most remarkable of all, Klaus Schmidt proposed that Göbekli Tepe was a ritual center built before the surrounding settlements, that the need to build and maintain the complex drove the development of agriculture and settled life rather than the other way around. This reverses the standard model of civilization development and has generated intense debate among archaeologists. Researchers who have examined this evidence have described it as genuinely difficult to explain within the accepted framework. These are not fringe commentators. They are credentialed academics publishing in mainstream journals, raising questions that the field has not yet satisfactorily answered. Then there is the matter of the site was deliberately buried around 8,000 BC. Pillars and enclosures were filled in with debris in a process that appears intentional rather than the result of natural accumulation. The deliberate burial may have been a ritual decommissioning, or it may have been done to preserve the structures for future generations. Either way, the deliberateness of the burial is itself evidence of sophisticated intentionality. What makes this particularly significant is its independence from the previous points. This is not a case of one theory requiring another. These are separate lines of evidence converging on the same uncomfortable conclusion. Adding to the enigma is this finding. Flint tools found in the fill at Göbekli Tepe indicate that the people who built and used the site were hunter-gatherers dependent on wild game and gathered plant foods. There is no evidence of grain storage, animal husbandry, or other hallmarks of the agricultural revolution. This community organized massive construction projects without the material foundation that conventional models predict is necessary for such organization. This single data point, if taken in isolation, might be set aside. Anomalies happen, instruments malfunction, researchers make mistakes. But as we continue, you will see that this is not an isolated anomaly. It is part of a consistent and documented pattern. Equally puzzling to investigators, Göbekli Tepe has inspired a reassessment of dozens of other ancient sites worldwide. Several other pre-pottery Neolithic sites in Turkey and the surrounding region have since been shown to predate previous estimates. And the discovery has opened serious discussion about whether comparable pre-agricultural monuments exist elsewhere in the world but have not yet been recognized or dated correctly. Taken together, these facts form a pattern that cannot be explained by coincidence, misidentification, or methodological error. Each piece of evidence has been examined by skeptics. Each has been subjected to alternative explanations. And in each case, the alternative explanation falls short of accounting for everything that has been documented. We are left with a body of evidence that demands explanation and an accepted narrative that does not provide one. This is where serious inquiry begins. Now that we have established the evidence, we need to examine the theories that researchers have proposed to explain Göbekli Tepe, the monument that broke the history books. This is where the debate becomes most intense, because the theories reflect not just different interpretations of the same evidence, but fundamentally different assumptions about what is possible and what the past looked like. Understanding these theories is not just an academic exercise. Each one has been championed by serious researchers with genuine credentials, and each one captures something that the others miss. The truth, if it is ever established, will likely draw on elements of several. The first major explanation proposed by researchers holds that Göbekli Tepe was a regional cult center drawing pilgrims and labor from a wide area, built incrementally over centuries by different hunter-gatherer communities sharing a common religious tradition. The need to feed and coordinate the labor force who built and maintained it drove the initial experiments with grain cultivation, making it the origin point of the agricultural revolution rather than a product of it. This interpretation has significant academic support and is backed by substantial evidence, but it is not without problems. Critics point out that it requires assumptions that go beyond what the evidence strictly supports, and that key predictions of this theory have not been confirmed by subsequent research. It remains contested, and the contest is productive. A rival school of thought argues that the builders of Göbekli Tepe represent a level of social complexity among hunter-gatherers that mainstream archaeology has drastically underestimated. The assumption that complex organization requires agriculture is itself challenged by the site. It may be that cognitive and social complexity preceded material complexity by thousands of years. This theory is controversial, and deliberately so. Its proponents argue that the evidence demands an explanation outside the conventional framework. Critics counter that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that the evidence presented, while suggestive, does not yet meet that standard. The debate continues in peer-reviewed literature. Perhaps the most unconventional theory suggests that Göbekli Tepe is the surviving surface of a much larger and older tradition of monumental construction whose earlier phases and other centers have not yet been found. If the pattern established here, monumental construction by pre-agricultural societies, was widespread across the ancient world, the conventional timeline of human civilization requires fundamental revision. What is striking about this debate is not merely that experts disagree, that is normal and healthy in science. What is striking is the quality of the disagreement. Serious researchers, working from the same body of evidence, reaching genuinely different conclusions. That level of fundamental disagreement, when it persists over decades, is a signal that something important has not yet been understood. The question is not which of these theories is right. The question is whether any of them is right, or whether the truth is something that none of the current frameworks has yet been able to capture. The case surrounding Göbekli Tepe, the monument that broke the history books, does not rest on speculation alone. What distinguishes this investigation from pure mythology is the existence of documented, physical, verifiable evidence, material that has been examined by credentialed researchers and whose authenticity is not seriously disputed. What is disputed is its interpretation. Let us review the most significant documented evidence as objectively as possible. We are not going to cherry-pick the data that supports a preferred conclusion. We are going to lay out what exists and let you draw your own assessment. Physical evidence supporting this account includes ground-penetrating radar surveys of the unexcavated portions of the Göbekli Tepe site, published in 2018, identified approximately 16 additional enclosures beneath the surface, indicating the buried portion of the site is far larger than the excavated area, and that the full complex may be multiple times larger than currently recognized. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Investigators have documented zooarchaeological analysis of animal remains from the site's fill layers shows large quantities of wild gazelle, aurochs, and other game animals, confirming that the people using the site were primarily hunter-gatherers subsisting on hunted wild animals rather than domesticated livestock. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. On-site analysis revealed isotopic analysis of the water sources used by the site's builders, combined with the scale of the construction and the distance of the stone quarries, indicates that Göbekli Tepe require a sustained workforce of hundreds of people over multiple generations, an organizational capacity fundamentally incompatible with the small mobile band structure assumed for this period. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Each individual piece of evidence might, in principle, be explained away. A single anomalous artifact might be misidentified. A single anomalous date might reflect contamination. A single anomalous eyewitness account might reflect misperception. The question is whether all of the evidence can be explained away, and whether the explanations required are more or less plausible than the evidence itself. When multiple independent lines of inquiry converge on the same conclusion, that convergence is the most powerful signal in empirical science. And that is exactly what we are seeing here. We have examined the history, the evidence, and the theories surrounding Göbekli Tepe, the monument that broke the history books. Now we need to ask the question that is sometimes overlooked in discussions of ancient mysteries. Why does this matter? What does it mean for us today? It would be easy to file this away as an interesting historical curiosity, a puzzle from a distant past with no bearing on our present lives. That would be a fundamental mistake. The questions raised by this case touch on issues that are directly relevant to who we are, where we came from, and what the human story actually looks like before the period covered by conventional history. Göbekli Tepe has done more to revise the conventional timeline of human civilization than any other single discovery of the past century. Its implications are still being absorbed. If organized construction on this scale was possible 12,000 years ago, without agriculture, without writing, and without the institutional structures we associate with civilization, then the human capacity for complex social organization is far older and more flexible than we assumed. And if such capacity existed 12,000 years ago, what else existed? What other monuments, cities, or knowledge systems were created by the human minds of the deep past and have simply not yet been found? Furthermore, the tools available to investigate these questions are advancing rapidly. Satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, ancient DNA analysis, isotopic tracing, and deep-sea sonar are all providing capabilities that previous generations of researchers could only dream of. Cases that were genuinely unresolvable 10 years ago are now open to new analysis, and the findings, consistently, are expanding rather than contracting the mystery. The investigation continues. New discoveries are being made. New analyses are being published. New voices are entering the conversation from disciplines that were not previously part of the discussion. The answers, when they come, and they will come, will not merely solve a historical puzzle. They will force a fundamental revision of assumptions that underpin our entire understanding of human history and human potential. We have now walked through the complete case of Göbekli Tepe, the monument that broke the history books, from the historical record, through the physical evidence, across the competing theories, and into the modern significance of what remains unresolved. What the story of Göbekli Tepe ultimately reveals is not just a historical puzzle. It is a mirror. It reflects our assumptions back at us, our assumptions about what ancient people were capable of, about how knowledge is gained and lost across the centuries, and about the relationship between what we know and what we merely think we know. The evidence presented in this documentary is real. The questions it raises are genuine. The debate among researchers is ongoing, and that is healthy. Science is not a set of conclusions. It is a process. And the process requires that we remain open to evidence that challenges what we thought we knew, however uncomfortable that challenge might be. If you came to this documentary as a skeptic, we hope the evidence gave you something to think about. If you came as a true believer, we hope the critical examination gave you a more nuanced picture. The truth, as always, lies in the evidence, not in what we want to be true. Thank you for watching. If this investigation sparked your curiosity, please subscribe to the channel. We publish new documentaries every week, covering the full range of historical mysteries that the mainstream has not yet adequately explained. Leave a comment below telling us which case you want us to investigate next. The conversation continues. The investigation never ends.